Hello and welcome back once again to the HR Social Hour Half Hour Podcast. This is episode 104. John and Wendy talk to David Kovacovich. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Wendy. How's it going tonight, John?
Wendy, I am well. I want to take a moment to thank Humoriso here at the top for sponsoring this episode. Hard to believe. We've talked about this before. It seems like we're in this going to be a never-ending cycle now. It's time for the next monthly chat.
Oh, it is. And, I am so excited for our co-host for this chat. It's the end of February, the end of Black History Month, and sadly, the end of the Black Blogs Matter writing challenge. Just the writing challenge. Want to point out that you can still use the hashtag, still follow it. So Sarah Morgan, the Buzz on HR on Twitter, is going to be co-hosting with us, and she has some awesome questions. And we're going to challenge. We're going to challenge our chatters this time, talking about intersectionality. We're going to be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. Keep adding the words to that. But I think it's great. I'm really super excited about this. And we'll also get to talk a little bit about the Black Blogs Challenge with Sarah and all that she's done. I think this is the fourth year that she's hosted this challenge, and she kind of said it's time for her to move on, but it doesn't have to end. So I think it's a great way to close out Black History Month for sure.
I'm really excited when you mentioned that Sarah had approached you about doing it. I thought it was a very interesting topic for us, and certainly different from the last one, which pulling back the curtain we just had regarding HR tech implementation. Really appreciate everything that Sarah's done and what she's done with Black Blogs Matter. It'll be a great conversation. We hope people will join us. We were talking about before we started, we were struggling to figure out how to get people to remember the second and fourth Sunday of the month.
Set your reminders.
7 p.m. Eastern time, because I don't know how to do push notifications on Twitter. We'll figure it out. But yes, please join us then. It'll be a great conversation.
Please do.
Wendy said a great way to wrap up February. I'm really excited about tonight's guest. One of the few people we haven't met, but it seems like we've known him forever through social. So I'm going to let you make the introduction. We'll get started.
Awesome. So excited to welcome Dave Kovacovich to the show. He is the Director of Business Development at BI Worldwide, a member of the SHRM social media team, and a presenter with the Northern California Human Resources Association. David, first off, thank you so much for the short bio. I love those.
Yeah.
Secondly, what's in your glass?
Well, due to technical difficulties, I had to scrap my previously planned beverage, but it would be a Pliny the Elder from Russian River Brewery.
Nice.
That'll be waiting for me as soon as we're done.
Nice. Love it.
I don't think we've had anybody talk about, other than if they're still at work, talking about what they're going to have after the fact.
Right.
And Pliny the Elder has not come up yet, so kudos to you, sir.
Yes.
Great call. David, I know we had a chance to visit a few weeks ago and talk shop a little bit. How exactly did you get into the world of employee engagement and workplace culture?
Yeah, I started my career in data protection, which was this was a very long time ago when that kind of whole field was just developing, but it was a lot of working with IT and a lot of legal back and forth. And the company I worked for was great. I spent 8 years there. I learned a lot just from the way of how to navigate an organization and, all the things you do at the beginning of your career, which was fine, but it wasn't actually something that was engaging my passion. So, needed to make a career change. My time had kind of come up at the company I was with, and got a cold call for somebody who was hiring a director for an employee recognition program. That was 14 years ago, and we've evolved in a whole bunch of different ways, and I've been with a couple of companies in that industry since. But total makeover for me, going from IT to HR, going from doing long, arduous legal contracts to technology that's built out on initiatives that help people get better at their job. So I get to do the fun stuff in HR, which is really great.
Love it.
I don't know, man.
The fun stuff.
I say the contract stuff sounds fun to me.
Yeah. I could hire you then.
David, what do you find the biggest challenge your customers are facing when it comes to employee engagement?
Yeah, I mean, it's just evolved so much in the 14 years I've been doing it. There's a research side to employee engagement, but do surveys really work? Or are we doing focus groups or study groups? And how does that all work? And there's obviously a technology side to it, and there's events that people do. And it kind of depends on what the company culture is and where people are seated. A remote organization is going to have a lot more people on a collaboration tool or a social recognition tool. Whereas if you got 1,000 people in one place, it's going to be a lot easier to just pull everybody onto campus and have a big old event. So there's so many different arms to that employee value proposition. But the one thing I would say is with technology, we've got so many different technologies that we're asking our employees to use that handle a whole bunch of different things that are all kind of interrelated. And these technical suites have a whole bunch of different capabilities to them, but we only tend to use a few of those capabilities. So we've got an LMS for our learning library. We've got a CRM for tracking. We've got a collaboration tool might be embedded in the CRM. We've got an employee recognition, kind of points or pat on the back type of program that's on a different technology. So that's 5 suites that we're looking at already. And the biggest challenge is there's so many of those that from a user experience standpoint, especially employees that are on the go, they just want something simple that they can get in, get a quick little blurb out to somebody or do a little bit of collaboration with somebody or shoot someone a nomination or shoot them a little social recognition thank you, or go into their performance module and just be able to look real quick about what their goals are and to have some interaction with those goals. And so all of that I feel like can be centralized, and all of it, even if you're using a few different platforms, there can be an entry way, a middleware, an employee profile that sits on an intranet where people can go in and touch all of those different platforms. And then ideally, if we can pull together a points-based system that relates performance management with learning management and employee recognition and your engagement scores, then we've really got something going that's really nice. So the roundabout way of answering your question is, ultimately, what we'd like to get to is something that's a little closer to all-in-one so that we're not spending exorbitant dollars on a whole bunch of platforms that we're only using in a real bastardized type of way to only do a couple of initiatives within the capability suite.
David, how are you seeing across industries, what are you seeing when it comes to finding that suite? Do you feel like people are trying to gravitate to that? Are they still kind of just piece and parts because we see so much more of that across the tech perspective, right? In other words, it seemed like years ago you bought one thing and it did it all. Now it's a much more plug and play kind of system based on ease of use and whatever it may be. Are you seeing people gravitating to that one platform? Or?
Yeah, it's getting easier to do that. And I think it's just a matter of getting around to it. And then I think the other thing is, if you've invested a bunch of money in a suite, you kind of don't want to put it to rest if there's something that can be done on another platform because, it was a year-long project implementing this learning management system and you spent $1 million on it and you've got 200,000 employees to get onto the site and to register onto the site and to adopt the site. And now asking them to pull back or pull away from that is a little less easy than kind of redesigning the process there. So I think the unfortunate thing is you've got anchors sunk in a lot of different seas, but bringing them all together, while it's easy enough, it's just been a challenge getting people to overhaul those things.
Let's talk a little bit about an article you wrote recently. You wrote, I think, for your blog and then was shared with Sherm as well. You wrote about the opportunity economy and really shifting when it comes to employee recognition, moving to a more individualized approach and seeing that with the customers you're working with. What advice would you give to HR practitioners that are working with their leadership teams that are trying to move to a similar model?
Micromanagement is the worst thing that is happening in the workplace. It's the worst thing that ever has, and it's still around in some places. I think it's getting a little bit better generationally as different people step into middle management roles, but that employee manager relationship is the most important thing that anybody's going to have in any job they do. And if you don't like your boss or your boss doesn't like you, it's a tough situation to be in, regardless of how much you like your customers and the other people you work with and the place where you are and the product you're part of, or whatever it may be, the cause you're working for. So what I'm really looking at is self-selection of goals. So you may have heard of the SCARF methodology. SCARF, SCARF stands for, it's different, intrinsic motivators, but essentially getting an employee to stack rank what's important to them. So some people are going to be more collaborative. Some people might be more competitive. Some people want to climb the ladder. Other people just want to be left alone. Having a better understanding of what those employees' motivations are is super important. And having an employee being able to select that is even more important. And then taking that manager to peer relationship and opening it up a little bit is what I think is ultimately going to be the savior for culture and employee engagement, because people get burnt out because they don't like their boss and there's closed door conversations. And we always think that performance reviews are going to go away. I mean, it's been a trend and we've talked a lot about it. And I think goal setting is more important than really, really structured performance management. But there still has to be some type of legal document that exists between a manager and people who work for them. So that still remains a little bit of a hurdle. However, I think if we can get to a point where an employee can select their own path and they can dive into that path and their manager can be one of a couple of different people helping them navigate that, then we're getting out of the silos and we're getting away from those conversations that are just built on captivity more than trust. And we just got to get to a more trusting place where managers don't feel like they have to trap their employees into following the rules, because if that happens, people are going to do just enough to survive. And that's no way to lead your life in an organization. So I think opening up that goal setting, opening up the performance management, allowing employees to kind of navigate their own path and course correct as they go, all of that stuff ultimately I think is the future of what will happen there, which then ultimately could knock the micromanagement out of it and get people collaborating a lot better. And ultimately, it's a better thing for managers too, because it frees them up to trust the employees that work for them, to give them the skills to ascend the organization. And every manager should want their best employees or all their employees to get promoted. And so if you have that system in place and people can plug into it, I think it's going to be really effective.
I want to know how we get there. It sounds great.
Yeah.
I like hallelujah past the.
Yeah. So how do you help the managers get to that point? Because, they've come up in a certain way. Yep. And, this is, we all hate the phrase, the way we've always done it. Yep. But it's so true that when you had, the manager that brought you up, that you've worked under, you're going to be a lot like them, whether you like it or not. How do you help people get into that new place of that we're going to do it differently and it's going to be great?
There are certain people who are incapable of it's just, we talk about employee engagement from all the different systems that are in place and all the bells and whistles, but it really just comes down to human beings and how they interact with one another. And there are individuals whose approach to management rests in control, and those people are never going to be able to hop into a program like that. I think that the way that it can work is if they do try it out and it is successful and they figure out how much easier it makes their job, then ultimately the trust factor, or the fact that we feel like we're taking part of their job away from them, is going to be more realized as, no, actually you're freeing me up to do a whole lot of other things. And so, the other thing is employees should be free to navigate the organization however they want to. Do you want them to get burnt out and leave because they don't see a path? Or do you want to open up other opportunities for them? And maybe they're not a great fit for your team, but they might be able to work with somebody else in a different part of the organization. And if that person is a co-coach for them when it comes down to goal setting, ultimately then you retain a great employee, you find a different place for them. And then if the employee and the manager aren't seeing eye to eye, the manager will probably be fine with that anyway. You cannot teach an old dog new tricks. There are certain managers I've had who would absolutely not be capable of that. But I think it's more so going to be a matter of time and a matter of a little bit of change management. And then the way kids are being raised now and the way they're interacting with one another in high school, the social hierarchy is different than it was when I was going through high school. And I think ultimately there's a wave of change there that takes into account things like mental health and collaboration and the right of employees to be able to navigate their own success. That's going to start being mainframe in what we do in the whole world of employee engagement. And I think that's going to be really great to see.
I like it. I like how you're taking it. I'm going to say you can teach an old dog new tricks with the right treats. Taught my 8-year-old dog some new tricks this summer with some new treats.
Yeah.
But had to have the motivation. You had to have the right motivation for him, because otherwise he was just like, no. But I think you're onto something there, because there has to be the desire and the ability for someone to make that change. If they're happy with the status quo, we've all seen that. There are managers that they're managers or supervisors or whatever because they've been in the job the longest.
Yep.
I like the direction we're going with getting people in supervisory and leadership positions who want to be there, and
Yep.
other ways to succeed besides just being a supervisor. So love it. So how did you switch a little bit? How did you first get involved in the HR community when it comes to blogging and social media?
Yeah, I started on the social media team, the SHRM social media team 7 years ago, I believe, the beginning of 2013, if I'm not mistaken. Curtis, I was a vendor that went to different SHRM international conferences and stood at a booth, and all of the people on the social media team at that time were pretty much all former practitioners or small business owners. And so Curtis Midcliff brought me in just kind of to display the exhibitor side of things, or the vendor side of things, when it came to what we could do from the standpoint of being involved in bigger conversations about human resources. And so I had a very different job set and a very different perspective than most of the people on the team. And I think initially people were a little curious about what I was doing there, or what I was trying to do, or what my intent was. But really, it's just, if we think about the vendor practitioner relationship, and we think about it from the standpoint of, I'm trying to sell you something, it really gets formalized and it really gets dulled, and it's not effective. So what I was able to do was then sit in the room and listen to people present at these big SHRM events. And I was no longer standing at an exhibitor booth scanning badges. I was sitting there with people, hearing about the real challenges of their job. And it just completely enlightened what I started to do from the standpoint of helping people as a consultant in the HR space. So that experience really opened up for me, not just a knowledge of everybody who I was working with in HR from a customer standpoint, but a larger perspective on what the day-to-day stuff is. And then you take the commodity out of the relationship and you really start acting as peers. And it's been a revelation for me. And I've 7 years later, still doing it, still participating. And, it's more than anything, Wendy, just a knowledge sharing and a way of relating to people and a way of kind of meeting people where they sit. And I'm lucky to have the opportunity to do that, because most people still think scanning badges and giving demos is the way you build trusting relationships. And we all know that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This episode of the HR Social Hour Half Hour podcast is brought to you by our friends at Humoriso. Humoriso strategizes with companies to develop plans to manage talent, recruit for skill gaps based on employee inventories, assess markets for growth, develop long-range succession plans, and influence a culture of enthusiastic buy-in. They handle all facets of organizational development and provide strategic direction to their clients. Humoriso provides outsourced human resources services, including their flagship HRO plan, which helps businesses save money, increase productivity, and reduce legal risks by providing dedicated HR consulting for compliance, training, performance management, employee relations, workplace management, discipline, and other important HR best practices. To learn more and to schedule a time to speak with a Humoriso consultant, you can visit them at humoriso.com. Thanks again to Humoriso for sponsoring the HR Social Hour Half Hour podcast. And now, back to the show.
And we are back. Dave, it is now time for everyone's favorite part of our show, the half-hour question connection. This is where everyone gets the same questions. So first question, what career did you dream of having when you were a child?
I wanted to be a professional wrestler.
Nice.
Yeah. When Hulk Hogan dropped the boot on the Iron Sheik in Madison Square Garden, it changed my life forever. I've always been a sports fan. I am a big fan of the theater, and the combination of the two things there. A pivotal moment in my life, looking back on that exact match that turned everything around for me. So, unfortunately, I wrestled in high school, but left high school at about 145 pounds. So I was about a third of the weight I needed to be a hero in the World Wrestling Federation. But, so anyway, I had to leave that one behind, but that was the dream for me.
That's a first.
It is a first, and kudos to you, sir.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. Who's one person you've gained in your network in the last year that you think more people should know?
Ted Bauer. Do you guys know him?
Yeah,
he's been on a few. He's been on a few Knicks chats, and he's got his own podcast and a blog. And he's got a very refreshing way of going about things. I mean, he leaves himself pretty vulnerable in social media, which I think is interesting. And he's kind of got a different way of looking at things, and I've really enjoyed the follow. I think he's Ted Bauer 2003 on Twitter, and he's got a really cool podcast as well.
Nice. I don't think I knew he had a podcast. I'll have to check that out. Always love listening to other podcasters for sure. So, Dave, a new HR professional asks you for one piece of advice. What do you tell them?
I think it's in every job, but in HR, you can be tactical and strategic at the same time. And I think there are so many people who are just really good at the nuts and bolts stuff that we're continually trying to get to be more strategic. And you don't have to have an MBA to relate to, a sales executive, or you don't have to program in Linux to relate to somebody in IT. I mean, human resources, I do honestly feel, is really important as the backbone of soft skill development. And it's just all about human relationships. And we tend to ask people to know everything about the people they're working with in order to get through the door of their office. And I just think, where human resources comes in, there's a whole lot of stuff that people can do from a tactical standpoint, that just bringing something to somebody that's going to help them do their job better. But the bigger part of it is just relating to people and getting out of the office or getting on the phone with people and letting them know that you're there to help, and that there's a lot of different things you can do to make their jobs easier, and where their core kind of oversight of what their department might be can be essential to what they need to do to succeed. There's a lot of things that the human resources group can do to help people develop as leaders through soft skill development. We just get way too intense about making people want to be these extraordinary extroverts, or these people who know everything about every individual department in the organization, when in fact, it's just all about getting out and talking to people, figuring out what they need, and being a partner to them.
Dave, how do you enjoy giving back to the HR community, your community at large?
Well, you remember I reached out to you initially about this podcast because I was missing the Knicks chats that we used to do once a week for an hour. But that's still the main part, where there's still a daily question there where I can go in and chime in and give some people some advice or get some advice from other people. And participating in the daily Knicks chat through Sherm on Twitter is the main way I'm staying involved. I do some presenting here for the in NCHRA, which is the Northern California Human Resource Association as well. And there's mixers and things of that nature. But I just like the way that interacting with people on Knicks chat on Twitter is simple and easy, and it's a way to reach a whole bunch of different people in a whole bunch of different areas, and the opinions are really valid, and it helps open people's spectrum a little bit. So that's still my area of participation.
Obviously, we love that.
It's fun.
That's our thing. It is. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to meet a lot of folks. So, yeah, and if you need an hour-long one, second and fourth Sunday of each month, we'll just plug in that away.
I'm on it. Those Sundays tend to be long days for me, but I am.
It's hard to find time that works for everybody. I'll just say that, but hopefully one or a few of them you can find.
You guys have picked up the torch elegantly, and it's working great for everybody.
Well, Dave, what is your favorite movie?
Stranger Than Fiction. Will Ferrell in a non-comedic role, but it's just a really awesome movie that's writing itself as it progresses. I don't know if you've seen it, but not super popular. I just love it from a writer's perspective because it's just so interesting to follow the narrative as it happens.
It's been a while. I haven't thought about that movie in a long time.
How about your favorite musician or band?
Well, this is a very difficult one for me, John. You know that. I am a fanatic of music. So if I could give you 9 answers, I would. But you and I bonded over Ben Folds, who I love. I love the Weaker Thans. I love Fountains of Wayne. I love the Long Winters. I love a band called 4 Stars from San Francisco, FOR Stars. But if I have to make a choice, body of work, all-time greatest, Radiohead is the band for me. Just the extraordinary musicianship, the continual innovative way of doing things in the way that they've always challenged themselves. That body of work is extraordinary. And if there's any kids out there listening, okay, computer, put it on, listen to it. You have to listen to it about 100 times to get it. But if you ingrain that in yourself, your life will be a much, much better place to be.
See, now that's where you should have said, hey Siri, hey Alexa, please go ahead and play.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that yet, but I'll have my son come chime in and help me with that at some point.
How about a favorite TV show?
The Joe Pera Show. Don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but he's a comedian that's been around forever that does a show which is based in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And it's extraordinarily dry humor, but also incredibly heartwarming, and just he concentrates on the very, very simple, wonderful things in life. And it's on Adult Swim. It's a great show.
Okay.
Nice.
Like you mentioned, Dave, we certainly bonded over Ben Folds. And when you told me you'd seen him 50 times, you take the crown, sir, because I thought I was a super fan.
Mm-hmm. So
I'm not even close.
There's a kid who works at the pizza store down the street from my house, and they've got a bunch of beers on tap, and we always hang out there. And he is moving from here in Northern California down to Hollywood to become a filmmaker, and his name is Steven. So Wednesday night will be Steven's last night in town. I have waited my entire life for this event, and it is all coming together.
Beautiful. Yep. That's great. That is excellent. Well, if you're not watching Stranger Than Fiction, not listening to Radiohead, or watching the Joe Pera Show, which I'm going to check out. Never heard of it before. What else do you like to do outside of work?
I coach Little League Baseball. I'm on the education committee for the Phi Delta Theta fraternity. So we're building content for leadership and ethics development within the construct of that fraternity. And I got a great 14-year-old son who I love hanging out with, who is a musician, who's doing a Radiohead all cover show through School of Rock here pretty soon. I watch my 11-year-old daughter play soccer, and I get to hang out with my sweetheart from time to time, who I've been with for 20 years and is the light of my life. So all pretty boring adult stuff, but it's coming together, man. I'm stoked. I got it all figured out.
I love it. That is fantastic. All right. Well, finally, it is Dave Kovacovich Day all around the world. What are people doing to celebrate?
It's such a fun question, and I guess I would answer it by saying I am not going to pretend I'm not a person who has had a lot of privilege in my life, and I wouldn't ever take advantage of that. So I'd say on Dave Kovacovich Day, I would defer to the less fortunate. And if there were people out there who are struggling with mental health issues or addiction, or are just in a tough place professionally and can't seem to get through it, I'd love to just have my day be set up with mental health workers on every corner and a table to sit down at, and an encouragement to everybody to sit down with those people and have a conversation with them and not to feel any stigma around it. And man, if we could start that movement, the world would certainly be a better place. And a lot of the things we keep bottled up inside that hold us back could get out of the way. And, I wish the best for everybody who's going through a tough spot, who might be listening to this. And hopefully the work I have done and continue to do will contribute to their ultimate happiness, because they're as important to me as anybody else.
Wow. That's awesome.
Dave, again, we are so appreciative of your time and what you've done in the community and what you continue to strive to do. I'm guessing there may be some listeners, though, that don't know you or didn't know you before this conversation that are want to get connected now. What's the best way for them to reach you out there?
LinkedIn, Dave Kovacovich. I'm sure the name will be there. It's not the easiest one to spell, but that's probably the best place to find me. And then I'm on Twitter under the same name, and you'll see me on chats and all the great stuff you guys are doing. And thanks for what you guys are doing, because I know it's taken out of your personal time to do these things for other people. And it's really important and really helpful, especially as all of the original chats we were on start to fall by the wayside. It's great that you guys are carrying the torch. So we're with you all the way.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We'll have it in the show notes too. Wendy, what's the best way for listeners to find you out there?
Best way is on my blog, mydailyjourney.com. Daily, D as in dog, AILEY. And of course, we've said it a couple of times, but second and fourth Sunday of each month, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, you will find both John and I on Twitter as part of our bi-monthly Twitter chat. How about you, John?
Real quickly, want to thank once again the folks at Humoriso for sponsoring this episode. As always, we really appreciate partnering with us in that way. And as for me, there's a new way to find me.
Yes.
JohnThurman.com. You go there, you can find me, you can find out the show, you can find everything you need. And so those that say it's hard to find me, you don't have an excuse anymore.
Nope.
JohnThurman.com.
Finally.
Yes, if you've listened all the way to the end, it's a new end of the show. Hey, international listeners, make sure you contact us. We do want to send you a gift.
Yep.
We would love to talk to you and connect in that way. So if you are listening and you've gotten this far, shoot us a note.
Yep.
And if you're listening to the show, if you go to the website and look at the show, listen, rate, download, review, anything you do and everything you do to help us boost the signal, we appreciate. So Dave, thanks again for being with us. So for the HR Social Hour Half Hour Podcast, I'm John.
And I'm Wendy. And as always, be sure to connect,
give back, and network. Take care, everybody.
We'll see y'all soon.